Okay, we'll go ahead. We'll get this started. Todd has decided to be a puppy, so no. Good afternoon. Welcome to our first session of the afternoon. Meet the TPRF board. My name is Peter Krawcyzk. I am the treasurer of TPRF. With me on the stage is Makoto Nozaki, who is the recorder. Daniel Sockwell, who is board member, and we also have joining us over a Zoom session here, Todd Rinaldo, who is also a board member. We may be able to get Stuart a little bit later on, but he is unable to join at the moment. So click, and we will get started. So I just went ahead and I introduced all of us. We are the current 5 members of the TPRF board. And what do we do as a board? Well, our job is basically to be the stewards of the things that the community requires somebody to be a steward of. So those are the things like the trademarks of Perl and Raku. Those are held by the foundation. Several of the community domains, we manage those. We don't manage them all. There's quite a few people in the community that still own their domains. Even Perl.com is still held by Tom Christensen, but we do hold many of them. We are also the primary financial and legal vehicle of this conference. This conference doesn't happen without TPRF. There are other conferences that have their own legal setups. YAPC EU had their own for a long time. There are other summits and whatnot, but for this conference, it is TPRF that is putting the money into the bank account that pays for the bills and holds the liability insurance. We are also a general manager of funds. So we accept donations, we then pay out grants, we pay other expenses. So for example, we've sponsored other conferences and workshops. We are sponsoring as a foundation the Perl and KohaCon next month in Helsinki. We've sponsored the recent Raku Core Summit. We have sponsored the Raku conference that has just been rescheduled. I believe September or October. We're still getting details on that. So we do those things. We also provide grants to complete work on behalf of the languages. The most notable grants that we sponsor are for Tony Cook and Dave M. for a lot of their ongoing work in the core Perl development. But we also do accept applications and pay other grants as well. In addition to that, we don't have on here, I believe we're doing Outreachy again this year, and we have other programs that we also participate in to help and try drive awareness of the language. We hold the insurance and the other financial guarantees. We have the bank accounts. We're the ones that sign the contracts to make all of this stuff go. And finally, we pay for the trademarks, we hold the domains, we defend the marks. So if somebody, we spent, I think last year we spent it wasn't that much money, but somebody still had to employ a lawyer in one of the countries, I think it was Japan, was it Japan? Japan. Yeah, it was Japan to renew our trademark on Perl. So that's an example of the sort of stuff that we do. We're also working hard to try and improve marketing and publicity. Dean has been doing quite a bit. Dean's in the back here in order to help raise more awareness. The merchandising stuff that he's been doing has been amazing. It's an effort to try and raise visibility and awareness of the languages to help keep our community alive. On the flip side, what doesn't the Perl and Raku Foundation do? Well, we don't control or dictate the future of the languages. We're not sitting up here saying, well, if we're going to release 540 next year, it's got to have these features or what. We do not get that into the actual direction of the languages. That is the responsibility of the Perl Steering Council and the Raku Steering Council. They are independent. We support them. Again, we recently paid towards the the RACU Core Summit. So we're very happy to help support them, but we don't have our fingers into what the languages are, if that makes sense. We don't run community websites or spaces. We don't run Perl Monks. We don't run MetaCPAN. We don't run raku.org. We don't run any of those spaces. We're willing to help these sites keep the lights on. We recently had a request come in for I believe it was for CPAN testers, to help try and find some funding in order to help them go along because they can't maintain the infrastructure any longer. We're still seeing how we can help. We don't have an answer on that yet, but that's the sort of thing we're trying to do. But at the end of the day, those are the community's websites, not ours, and we are not trying to control them in any way, shape, or form. We also don't control or dictate to the community or manage its interactions. We have had issues in the past, and we are trying to face them, but we also recognize that we only really have authority over this space, the conference space, and the Slack, and the areas that TPRF is actively managing. So, when we look at the situations that happen out in the community, we have no authority to go in and say, okay, well, you're acting bad, you need to take a timeout. That's not what we can do. But we can at least try and help figure out a path forward in order to help resolve these things. So, since we last met last year in Houston, we've been a pretty busy foundation, and we've put out a lot of money into the community. We've paid over $80,000 in grants for maintenance and development. As I said, we've paid for Tony Cook and Dave M to continue their work, but we've also paid some smaller grants. We've paid for some summits. We've paid for some development tool chain items and things like that. We've also paid over $60,000 for conferences and conference sponsorships. That includes this conference. That includes the Perl and KohaCon. That includes the RACU conference. That's the sort of thing that we like to fund to help the languages grow. We've invested about $3,000 in marketing and swag. So we updated the prospectus that we developed last year. We have a version for this year as well that is available on the website. We've created logos for merchandising and other events. As I said, Dean has been instrumental in getting that store up and running, and we have a new limited edition 538 merch. We've got shirts and stuff. The flyers are floating around the conference here. We reinstated the White Camel Awards. We paid for the trophies, not only for the yes, we didn't buy the white. We paid for the trophies that were awarded both at this conference and the next one that we will award in December. And then we also hired another Perl intern under Outreachy, mentored by last year's Perl intern and the Open Food Facts team. So we are investing a lot of money into the community to help try and revitalize some of the activity and keep other things still going so that the entire community can enjoy it. We also have community meetings. So every month, the leaders of our various committees within TPRF meet on a Zoom call. We also have other members of the community who are not necessarily committee members necessarily. They also join the call. And for the most part, if you have something that needs to be said in regards to what the foundation or its committees are doing, you're welcome to join. You just simply need to message somebody and we will get you added to the invite. We have had this meeting. We have selected some new chairs. I know Safe has taken over the grants committee. I know Dean has been doing the marketing again. You've been doing it for more than a year, but 3 years now. There we go. We are still looking for some more committee leads as well. And so if you feel that that is a talent that you can provide to the foundation, we would love to have you and talk about the available committees that desperately need help and leadership.
Not just leads, we could use more people who would get
Yes, Dean, as Dean points out, we need more people who are willing to help on the committees as well. So if you're, if you can help us spread the marketing word far and wide, or you can help us sort of figure out a better legal strategy or things like that, we have, or want to help us put together the conference. These are all committees that we can use your help in. We have established more regular communications. We have the news.perlfoundation.org has been more active recently. We've been doing more on Facebook, trying to keep those conversations going. There have been other venues that we've been talking in. We've also brought back the White Camel, and again, we awarded it on Tuesday, and we'll be awarding them. I think ongoing, our decision is to award the White Camel in December of each year. We are also trying to work with the RACU Steering Council to co-present and award the Rainbow Butterfly, so that we can do that together as a community. So the areas that we're currently mainly addressing, fundraising efforts. So as we are all well aware, we are very thankful for the sponsors that we do have. 5 years ago, this list was a lot different. 10 years ago, this list was a lot different. As people move through the community, move through their employers, some of our sponsors don't stay with us because they're not doing as much in Perl, but then sometimes we get new sponsors. For example, DeRiv is a new sponsor this year, and thank you to Olaf Anders for finding them and leading them to us to help sponsor breakfast at this conference. We need help, though, figuring out how do we get more sponsorship? How do we best approach these corporations that need people that are doing Perl development and looking for more Perl people? How do we get them to invest in the community with us? How do we get individuals willing to, we actually have a pretty sizable number of individuals who donate $5 or $10 a month to the Perl Foundation. We love those donations. Every little bit helps. How do we encourage more of that sort of thing? Another thing we're working on is making TPRF resources more accessible. We recognize the website needs a facelift. It needs some reorganization. We're working on that, but Rome wasn't built in a day, and so we're making the changes we can as we have the availability. We're also working on funding or absorbing resources critical to the community if the owners ask. As I mentioned earlier, CPAN testers came to us and said, we need some help with our infrastructure because we can't maintain it in the current form. We're trying to figure out what that means. We are always looking for community volunteers. If you feel that you can contribute anything, please do, because even an hour a month is an amazing investment in our community that gets returned tenfold when we get to events like this or even in just online spaces. And then finally, we as a board are working on improving transparency and openness. This is our second one of these meetings at a conference. We're here to answer your questions after, pretty much after this slide. We are working on, we're working to basically make what we do a lot more open so that the community understands that we're not trying to be the overseers or dictators of the community, but rather we're here to support and do the things that somebody has to do in order to make sure that our community doesn't fall apart because somebody steals our trademark or somebody, somebody who wants to go to a conference and meet people can't, that sort of thing. So with that, I'd like to open the floor now and say, what can we accomplish together? So this is sort of the intent of these sessions is to be more of a town hall sort of session where if you have any questions or concerns, you can speak with us. Again, we have myself, we have Makoto, we have Daniel, we also have Todd on Zoom who he can hear us and he can answer back to you as well.
Well, I have a question on those notes. really related to what's on this slide.
And that's fine.
Yeah. So you had a slide about the money spending about 143,000. What I'm wondering is, how do you measure success? How do you know that was money well spent?
That's a very good question.
Repeat your question.
Yes, I'm getting to that, so thank you. So the question is, back on this slide over here, I said we've paid out about $140,000 over the course of the last year. And that's on the conference and on grants. And how do we measure that, and how do we know that that was money well spent? Well, first and foremost to me, and I'll have these gentlemen speak in a moment as well. First and foremost to me, it's what is the value of the work that we received out of the money that we paid. And that's obviously, if you're paying somebody to maintain the Perl core, that's sort of a difficult question to answer. I mean, what is the value of a patch? I don't know.
At least I know for the TPRC grants, you get a detailed report of what's being done.
Correct.
But when you spent $3,000 in marketing,
Mm-hmm.
what was the goal to get out of it? And did you get it out of it? Or
Okay.
did you just spend $3,000 and then afterwards you said, well, this was a success?
Okay, so the prospectus, for example, that was about $1,000 of that cost, and that was the cost of hiring a designer and laying out the cost, doing some printing, revising it again this year. That prospectus opened up a bunch of conversations. Was used at FOSDEM. Was used at the conference last year. I think, but I cannot prove that without that prospectus, we would not have at least one of the three sponsors behind us. So each one of these sponsors I'll be frank about it. Each one of these sponsors donated at least $2,500 to be up on this thing. So without that $3,000 investment, we wouldn't have necessarily had those those donations. As well, Stuart, if he were here, would be able to tell you that he's been using that prospectus in the European community to speak with other companies, and he has identified some funding sources and has been able to use that prospectus to explain why an investment in Perl would be, or an investment in Raku would be, a good investment for that particular company as a whole. And I don't want to speak to the opportunities that he has found. I wish he was here so that he could, but they are sizable. And I'll.
Is your question specifically about the $3,000?
No.
Okay. Hold on, one more thing for Abigail.
You're spending a lot of money, and I've asked the question before. Before we spend a lot of money, do we have a list of things that we want to achieve so we can determine this was a success?
You want to answer that, Peter? I've been involved in 2 years with practices. I think.
Do you want to come here and speak?
Yeah. So we're going to have Dean come up here and speak about this a little bit, and then I will have Daniel speak, and then I will have Todd speak.
Sorry.
No, it's quite all right.
But it's not specific about the 3,000.
Where's the microphone?
Right.
Microphone? Hello?
Yeah, just speak down
so-
at the screen and you'll be fine.
I don't know. Okay, good question. Can I change your question a little bit? If I'm a donor, how do I know I'm getting good value for my money? That's the question I want to ask. And that's the question that we wanted to answer in the prospectus, because we wanted to be able to go to donors, potential donors, and say, if you give us $1, we'll give you $1.50 in value. And this is how we give you that value. And one of the challenges that we continue to face is when we went to the steering committee of Perl and said, what's your roadmap? They're like, oh, we haven't got a roadmap, but these are some things that we want to do. It's like, hold on, isn't that kind of a roadmap? And then they're like, no, we're not going to commit to them in this time frame. The Raku Steering Council, Daniel, they're really good. They work with us really well. They're like, yes, this is great, and we have these goals in mind and sort of stuff. So to your question, it has been trying to get people to think about roadmaps and what we're trying to deliver and where we need to get to, so we can go out and ask for money and say, this is what we're trying to do with that money. But each individual dollar, was it well spent? Well, in a lot of cases, we have a specific outcome. Like when we go to the graphic designer and say, design us this prospectus, and they give it to us, like, okay, then we pay them. So we've clearly got what we wanted. Is that prospectus effective? Well, good question. Peter's saying he feels it's effective. Stuart feels it's effective. But I'll give you another example from that $3,000.
Well, actually, I'm more interested about 60,000.
Well, I'll give you an example from my committee that I think was not necessarily a great outcome, right? So we have been trying to get articles in magazines. And Nick, who used to work with us, built some relationships with some of the magazines. And we really struggled to get articles to them on time, and we kind of burnt that bridge. Then she kind of unburnt it. And then we had this idea that we could go out and get all these blog posts. And so then we would be able to present a bundle to the magazine. So then some of the money from that paid Nick and I did it out of my own free time. I don't have free time. I cut time from my family late at night and sat with her on Zoom. And we went through all these blogs, and we put a pack together. We sent it to a bunch of magazines, and no one decided to pick it up. So was it a good spend? Well, no, it didn't give us a result, but we tried.
About individual things that you have done now, but more about the general idea going forward. How are you going to measure success?
I'll hand it back to the treasurer.
And are you, before spending the money, do you have an idea what you are going to consider success? Or are you going to spend the money and then afterwards thinking, okay, yeah, this was a success or not?
Right, unfortunately, I don't have a direct answer to that question, and that's what we're trying to figure out, is how to measure that sort of thing. I personally think that the time that we spend at this conference is invaluable. I mean, it's not clearly invaluable because we're not going to spend $1 million on the conference, but at the same time, out of the $60,000 that we spent in that conference, is $45,000 of that was spent on this particular conference, and out of that $45,000, really it was between ticket sales and sponsorships, we really recouped about half of that. So really, it's about $20,000 that we spent on the conference. I think it's worth it. We've brought people back to the community who were completely out, and now they're willing to contribute again. That might pay for itself easily. I'm going to hand the microphone over to Daniel here in just a second to speak on this. I also do want to say that Stuart has now joined us, so he will also be able to answer this question as well. So we'll do Daniel, and then we'll do Todd, and then we'll do Stuart.
I want to thank you for that question. I think it's a really great question, and it's one that the board actually spends a lot of time thinking about. And like at our meetings, a lot of what we're discussing is, will the benefit of this particular spend be worth it? So it's definitely one we grapple with, and I will say, frankly, that we don't have as good a metrics for a lot of things as we would like, and the result of that has been that our spending has been lower perhaps than it should be. I mean, to take the grants, for example, our grants are typically funding developers at $50 to $60 an hour, which, given that many of the developers we're funding are extremely talented people hacking on very high-level things for, core Perl, core Raku, that is much less than developers of that caliber would typically charge. Could we, pay people 2 or 3 times as much and get work that is worth paying, $200 an hour for instead of $60 an hour? It may be that we could, but because we don't have a great metric for how much value we are getting, we have erred on the side of not spending money. But it's definitely something that I think all of us are looking at better ways we can measure. Similarly with marketing or with conferences or with sponsorships, like it could be, if we had better metrics, we could more confidently spend money knowing that it is worth it. But because we haven't been exactly sure how much value we've gotten, that has pushed us towards being very conservative. So I can't necessarily say that we have great ways of determining it, but I am pretty sure that we've erred on the side of doing things that are definitely giving us a good return on the money we're spending, which has resulted in us spending less money than we might otherwise. And I want to turn it over to someone else, but does that help address where you're coming from?
My question was not to create a sort of
Right.
spending, more in general. How do you measure?
Right.
Right.
And we do have some measurements. I mean, we look at, how much enthusiasm we're getting, both like for the conference, we look at conference attendance, we also look at YouTube views, we look at discussion that goes on with the conference, with grants, we look at, the actual deliverable from the grant and the reception it gets in the community. So we definitely have some ways of measuring our results, but as I said, we're constantly having that question and that discussion internally of how can we do more to quantify what we're getting and decide whether, this was worth it, even more would have been worth it. And where we can't quantify as much as we would like, that has caused us to be very conservative in terms of how much we're spending.
Okay, see to Todd.
Todd, I know you wanted to say something as well, so I'll turn it over to you.
Mine is short and sweet, and I know it wasn't Abigail's primary question, but I can tell you that getting funding for Perl Conference in the past, I have talked to a lot of prospective donors, and very often their question is, do you have a prospectus? And not having that has definitely caused problems. That's it.
Okay. All right, and then, so with that, I will cede the floor to Stuart. Stuart, just so you're aware, you are not on camera, so.
Okay, no problem. And sorry to join late, and good to be part of this. Pete, just to say, I can see you and I can see the sign, but I can't see the audience. Also, I don't know quite who we're talking to, but I'll run through this anyway. So, first question is, first point I'll make is we do not have concrete measures to be able to answer, are we getting value? The question is, can anyone? And the kind of work we do, I think to an extent we need to take a judgment as to whether how well we try and solve that problem. And it's the same with marketing. There's many comments around marketing as with developing software in many respects. It's sometimes quite hard to measure the input against the output. It really is what you do with it. So I think certainly it's important we spend money. There's no question. The prospectus was very valuable. Without these things, I guess people don't always say, where's your prospectus? They do in some cases. But the fact that they don't ask the question, they assume you haven't got one, you're invisible. It doesn't even bring up the viewpoint that there even should be one. So when you start upping the game, when you start having things like prospectus, you have more information, more brand awareness. And as with any kind of leadership, you don't necessarily have people saying, great, that's just what was needed. It was, okay, well, of course you needed that, but where's the next thing? So we've got to be active. We've got to spend the money. We do have to be careful. We have to be responsible. It's not only sponsorship money, but it's people in the community who are volunteering as well. So we have to be really respectful to make sure we understand all of these investments, not just the direct money, but the efforts. As Dean was saying, what price does one put on Dean's evening with the family? And then what price does one put on 20 of Dean's nights with the family over 3 weeks? It's very, very hard to quantify these investments. And I think also sometimes we may even overthink the quantification of these things. And therefore we don't spend money, and therefore we don't really go as far as we need to. We need to be comfortable to take risks as well. This goes back to what is it we're trying to do in the first place? Why are we here, and what is our purpose? And if we look at what we're trying to do here, the foundation's objectives are, you may have covered this off earlier, but of course to manage the bank, to manage the money, but also to forward improve the reputation, build on the reputation, keep Perl and Raku current in people's minds. The software world has changed so much in the last 30, 40 years and in the last 10 years, and the issues around security and so on, which are more prevalent than ever before. Having our time focused on some of those activities may well create more measurable outcomes. We may well be able to very specifically say, okay, here's an outcome we want, let's specifically do it. But this is where the foundation can get together and work on some of those non-functional activities that sit around Perl and Raku. So, so I haven't got a concrete answer. I don't think anyone has, but I think what is important is that we must spend money. We must keep our profile, do the marketing, do the branding, and be transparent and be responsible. Work with the feedback that we get and do our best to deliver value to the communities as well as to the sponsors.
Does that answer your question?
That is an answer to the question.
Okay.
The response.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Are there any further questions? Thought I saw it. Back here.
So I'm just wondering what the level of involvement on the European side. So basically, I'm the president of the Swiss Perl Foundation, which is the Swiss
Would you like to come up and state this question so that Stuart and Todd can hear it? I apologize, but I'm not going to be able to relay all of this.
That's okay. I probably. Hi everybody. So yeah, my question is essentially what is the future of the involvement of the Perl and Raku Foundation in Europe? So my name is Lee. I'm the president of the Swiss Perl Verein. So we organize the Swiss Perl Workshop. We run some of the infrastructure for Raku. I'm also one of the organizers of the London Perl Workshop, which is essentially the biggest Perl event in Europe, apart from the main conference. And recently, for various reasons, things have started to fall apart a little bit. So the EPO has closed, YEF has essentially disbanded, and we're kind of left with 3 events in Europe. And it's not a monetary thing, because we can run these events on a shoestring budget. It's more about how can the Perl Foundation, the Perl and Raku Foundation get involved in more events. So not just big conferences and workshops, but grassroots events, speaking to companies to say, we will help you organize an event at your company. So that kind of thing, basically.
Okay, so the first big answer to that question is ask a question. So we've received requests, the Perl and KohaCon next month, for example, in Finland, was a conference that NUG came to us and said, hey, I want to run a grassroots conferences celebrating both Perl and Koha. Can you help me? We said, sure. And we basically, once we had the request, we had something that was actionable that we could do as a foundation. If we take a look at, yes, there are, there are a couple conferences over in Europe. This is pretty much the only conference in the States that is devoted to Perl and Raku. The main Raku conference is over in Europe. There is, of course, the London Perl Workshop and the various summits which meet wherever. The Raku Summit was in the Netherlands this year, I believe. So we would love to help. And to that end, we are actually putting together a playbook on how to run a successful event. And this is the second event. Next year will be the third, and then we have another one following that, where these 4 conferences basically in a row are being generally organized by the same folks. Yes, Todd reminds me that it is North America, not the States. We're not in the States, we're in Canada.
Thank you.
Not the States hat, thank you. But yes, we would love to assist with that. We would love to assist with organizing, and we would love to assist with getting all those little details together. But until we have somebody that steps up in a particular locale and says, I want to run a conference, can you help me? We can't do a whole lot. We can try reaching out to companies to say, hey, we can run an event for you, but without boots on the ground, it's almost impossible to actually do that, because running a conference from afar is not easy, as Todd can attest to. Todd really wanted to be here this week. I'm going to speak for you, Todd. Todd really wanted to be here this week, had his plane tickets, had his room, and unfortunately an emergency came up and he's not able to be here, which is why he's on the Zoom.
And my passport.
Oh, and your passport, yes. But we do want to help, but we need people to come and ask us the question of, hey, I want to run a conference. I want to run it here. What do I need to do? How can the foundation help me? And then I think we've proven with our actions over the past few years, we're willing to help in pretty much any way we can to help buoy the ships and keep these conferences afloat. With that, I'll turn it over to Daniel.
I agree with all of that. One thing I would add is that we would really like to have more people to help in Europe, that we have intentionally scheduled the community meetings at a time that is during daylight hours, working hours, and for both Americans and people in this general part of the world and in Europe. We have recently struggled to have attendees to the community meeting from Europe. And so if you know of people, or if anyone here knows of people who are involved in community efforts in Europe and, could come to the community meetings, and we could have, we have a grants committee report, a marketing committee report. If we could have a what's going on right now in Europe, in the European Perl and Raku communities report, or just anything like that would be super welcome and super helpful. And so, I'm kind of turning the question back around on you, is like, how can we help more? Because we would really like to.
Yeah, so, that's great. I think that the problem now is that there's fewer people in the community. So saying we need people to help, or we need people to come forwards, that's not going to happen.
It's a chicken and egg problem.
I know it's chicken and egg. So I think the TPRF has to be more proactive about approaching people working at companies or whatever to say, do you want to organize a conference? No. Okay. Do you want to organize a conference? Yes. Okay. Do you have people that can help us? Because those people aren't going to come forwards if they're not here, if they're not at LPW, they're not going to come forwards. So.
And to your point, when we came to this conference, we had one venue scheduled for next year. And I'm not going to speak for anybody, but we have 3 or 4 potential venues now for the year following, because people came to this conference and said, oh, hey, this is cool. Maybe if you guys are actually doing all of this stuff to organize, maybe I can just find you a venue and the whole thing will go. And so if we can get that playbook together, we can apply it to other regions and areas. So, Stuart, do you have a comment you want to make on this? And then I will cede the floor to Dean for his comment. Dean, you can come up here, but letting Stuart speak for a second.
All right. Thanks for the question, Lee. I would like to see more in Europe as well. As I'm sure you know, I'm UK based, between UK and France, and often in Geneva, so possibly close to your neck of the woods there anyway. There's, of course, FOSDEM is another activity, as Daniel's presenting the T-shirt there, which we've done our best to make sure we're part of as well, to have that European presence for the, so people understand Raku and Perl are interested in Europe. Community meeting time is currently under review. So yes, it is currently at a time which should work for Europe and UK, although it's a Friday evening and not everybody wants to spend Friday evening doing this. So it's currently being reviewed, and if there were interest in joining the community meeting, and I really encourage people to come along there. It's a great opportunity to get different areas of the community to share what they're doing and not only their initiatives, but what works for them. So do provide feedback if you think that there's a particular time that works. So yes, we certainly need to do more across Europe and connect that up. How to encourage the communities is really the question. What is the activity? Now, Andrew Nuggs mentioned earlier about his efforts with the COA community. He is very interested in also helping, spending time developing communities, bringing people together. So it may well be that he can be putting more effort into spending time reaching out to people, and by reaching out to people, getting people to be more aligned, so that rather than people being independently thinking, why am I the only person doing this? Getting a collection of people together to say, well, can we pool our efforts? Can we be aligned? Can we be working on the same initiatives? So that's our hope that we can do that. We've been looking for a community volunteer coordinator communicator for a while, and Andrew's stepped forward, subject to his time and availability. But I think the thing there is getting in touch, get anyone who's interested in being part of the more active in the European network, come to the community meeting. Let's see if we can group people together, get the communications going, work out how to best support it. Yeah, let's make it happen. I'm very keen. Reach out to me as well. I'm very keen to see that happen. LPW, it'd be great to see that on again, if that can happen as well.
Dean, you have a comment you wanted to add?
Yeah, sorry. So on that, let me put my thoughts together. Please, if people want to come to the marketing committee and get involved with what we're doing. We're really just need more hands, and we need people who are specialists in each what we call channel. And we don't have any bias towards which channels we're using. We're just trying to get into channels where Perl people are, especially people who are doing Perl and don't commit to CPAN and don't come to conferences. We're trying to connect with those people and sort of bring them in. And we've been pretty successful in some of the channels, but I mean, I can't be on everything all the time. It's just not feasible, and I'm not necessarily the master of any given channel. So please come and join us. There's no like big commitment. It's mainly about coordinating activities and making sure that we're looking out for things and making sure that the board is maybe aware of any sort of thing that's causing problems in a specific channel. But the other thing that I want to get people interested in, or involved in, we did this with FOSDEM. We had a stall at FOSDEM. Maybe people saw it if they went to FOSDEM, and it was extremely successful. The marketing committee would like to expand that to be kind of like a strike force or something. So at conferences, we have a booth, something like that, with people. We can give out prospectuses, we can give out merchandise, and let people know that we still exist. That's something we're interested in. If you're going to conferences anyway, that would be really great. If you want to come and help us know about that. But we don't have any game plan with that yet. It's just an idea. So jump on the marketing channel if you're interested, and helps out. Thank you.
Thank you. We only have a couple minutes left. So I don't know if either of you wanted to say anything, or if Dakota, did you?
Yeah, sure. But before that, I want to make sure no other questions. Like Stuart mentioned, transparency is important. One thing we are doing for grant, especially, is before giving money to any grants, we open for public comment. So if you have feedback on what we should spend money on, what we shouldn't, and then look at our news site, because again, we publish all the grants ideas, grant proposal, and then get feedback. So please, and we welcome your feedback on how we spend money, and we try to be transparent about it.
Okay.
And similarly, I want to thank all of you who are here in person for coming. Like, this is part of what we need is more feedback and more. So thank you all.
Okay, and we'll go ahead and close this out. Stuart has a final comment that he would like to deliver to us.
Yeah, well, my comment was actually around Europe, and I think there's a really important point to share with anyone who is interested in Europe, and that is that the European Commission have made available a significant volume of money through grants for open source activities. And in Switzerland, for example, there's the Prototype Fund who will pay people to write open source. There's a lot of activities. There's nothing like in the UK, but across Europe, there's a lot of interest in developing open source. So I think that's also something that needs to be considered, how we can connect to that and use those resources to make sure Perl and Raku get the benefit of those funds. So there was a comment around Europe, which I think is important to make. But I also want to thank everyone for turning up to listen. I'm sorry I came late. I really did want to be there in person this year. It wasn't going to happen for various reasons. All being well next time. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for all of your input and your questions.
Okay. And thank you very much for coming, everybody.
And just for completeness, we work also with Asia countries as well.
Yes.
So we try to be global. And Japan has the biggest ERC always, so we work with them. We try to work with them better.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for
Thank
coming.
you for coming.